I've sentenced thousands of people in my courtroom, but this case still keeps me awake at night. I have presided over thousands of cases in my lifetime. Speeding tickets, petty theft, domestic disputes. Most of them blur together over time. But every judge, no matter how many years he serves, carries a few cases that never fade. Cases that don't leave when the courtroom empties. Cases that follow you home and sit quietly in your mind when the lights go out. This is one of those cases. It began like any ordinary morning. The courtroom doors opened at 9 a.m. sharp. Wooden benches filled slowly. Lawyers shuffled papers. The bailiff called out names with mechanical precision. Nothing felt unusual. But experience teaches you something important. The most dangerous stories never announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, pretending to be ordinary. I took my seat behind the bench. The room stood. I nodded. "Please be seated." And that's when I saw him. He sat in the second row, hands folded, eyes lowered. No chains, no visible fear, no anger. If you passed him on the street, you'd never look twice. That's what unsettled me, because truly dangerous people don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look like your neighbor. Sometimes they look like you. The clerk read the case number. A serious charge, not the kind that appears on my docket every day. The air in the room changed. You could feel it, that invisible shift when people realize this isn't just another hearing. Even the usual courtroom noise faded. I leaned forward slightly, bring the defendant forward. As he stood, I watched his posture, his walk, his breathing. Judges learn to read these details the way doctors read symptoms. Fear shows itself in small ways. So does guilt. But what I saw disturbed me more than fear ever could. Calm, a dangerous, rehearsed calm. He stood before me, eyes finally lifting to meet mine. Not defiantly, not nervously, almost respectfully. That was my first warning. I asked him to state his name for the record. His voice was steady, clear, controlled. No shaking, no hesitation. That's when I realized something critical. This wasn't his first lie. This wasn't his first secret. People who commit crimes of impulse fall apart quickly. People who plan don't. I glanced at the prosecution. They were ready, too ready. Files stacked neatly, evidence labeled with precision. You don't prepare like that unless you know what's coming. The prosecutor stood and said something that immediately tightened my chest. "Your Honor, this case involves a crime that unfolded over time. A crime built on choices, not moments." Those words stayed with me, because crimes built on choices are the most terrifying of all. They mean the person had time to stop, time to turn back, time to choose differently, and didn't. I looked back at the defendant. Still calm. That calm told me this wasn't just about what he did, but about who he had decided to become. I asked for the summary. The courtroom listened as the prosecutor began to speak. A relationship, a betrayal, a decision that started small. Every terrible act begins innocently, a conversation that shouldn't have happened, a message that shouldn't have been sent, a thought that should have been rejected. No one wakes up one morning and decides to destroy lives. They slide into it, step by step, convincing themselves they're still a good person. As the story unfolded, I watched the faces in the courtroom. Some frowned, some shook their heads, some stared at the floor. But the defendant? He didn't react. Not when the victim's name was mentioned. Not when the consequences were described. Not even when the word irreversible was spoken. That absence of reaction told me everything. Because remorse leaks out naturally. If it doesn't, it was never there. At one point, the prosecutor paused and said, "Your Honor, what makes this case especially disturbing is not the act itself, but how preventable it was." Preventable. That word hit harder than any accusation. Because preventable means there was a moment, a single moment, where this man could have stopped, and chose not to. I leaned back in my chair. 40 years on the bench teaches you this truth. Most crimes aren't caused by desperation. They're caused by justification. People convince themselves they deserve what they're doing, that they're owed something, that the rules don't apply this one time. That mindset is more dangerous than any weapon. I looked directly at the defendant and asked my first question, not a legal one, a human one. "Do you understand why you're here today?" He nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Again, calm. Too calm. I followed up. "And do you understand what's at stake?" Another nod. "Yes." But when I asked the next question, something changed. "Do you understand who was hurt by your actions?" For the first time, there was hesitation. Just a fraction of a second. But in that fraction, I saw the truth surface, then disappear again. He answered carefully, I understand the situation. Not the people, not the pain, the situation. That was my second warning. When someone speaks about harm as a situation, they've already emotionally disconnected from it. That's when I realized this case wasn't just about justice. It was about accountability, something far rarer. The prosecutor asked permission to present the first piece of evidence. I granted it. And as the evidence appeared on the screen behind the bench, the courtroom changed forever. Gasps, sharp inhales, silence so heavy you could hear fabric shift. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was reality. I won't describe the evidence in detail, not because it wasn't horrific, but because it was human, and human suffering deserves dignity, not spectacle. I looked back at the defendant. For the first time, his jaw tightened. Not grief, not shame, control. He was trying to hold something in. And I knew then, absolutely knew, that this story was far from over. Because when a person fights to control their reaction, it means something inside them is finally being challenged. The truth. And truth has a way of cracking even the strongest masks. I raised my hand. Let's take a brief recess. The gavel struck, but the sound echoed longer than it should have. As I stood to leave the bench, one thought repeated in my mind. This case would not end quietly. And before this courtroom was finished, someone would finally have to face what they had been running from. When court resumed, the room felt different. People often think silence is empty. It isn't. Silence is heavy. It carries what words cannot. The defendant returned to his place, posture unchanged, hands folded, eyes forward, still calm. But I had learned something important during that recess. Calm can be rehearsed. Truth cannot. I nodded to the prosecutor. Continue. What followed wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. Because the most damaging truths are delivered slowly. The prosecution didn't begin with the crime itself. They began with the defendant's life, where he grew up, where he worked, who trusted him. That choice was deliberate. You see, crimes don't exist in isolation. They grow inside a person long before they ever appear in a courtroom. We learned that he was considered reliable, quiet, dependable, the kind of man people defend instinctively. That doesn't sound like him, someone whispered from the benches. That sentence has been spoken in courtrooms for centuries. I've heard it more times than I can count. And it's always followed by the same realization. People don't commit crimes as strangers. They commit them as someone you thought you knew. The prosecutor introduced messages, emails, records of communication that stretched back months. Each one seemed harmless on its own. That's how it always begins. One message is nothing. 2 messages are coincidence. 10 messages become routine. Routine becomes comfort. Comfort becomes entitlement. And entitlement becomes justification. As the timeline grew, the courtroom leaned forward, not because the details were graphic, but because they were familiar. Everyone recognized the pattern. This wasn't chaos. This was progression. I watched the defendant closely. His breathing changed. Still controlled, but faster now. I asked him to stand. He did. I asked him to look at me. He did. And then I asked the question no one ever expects. Why didn't you stop? That question isn't legal. It's moral. The law asked what happened. Justice asks why. He paused, just long enough. I didn't think it would go that far, he said. There it was, the sentence that ruins lives. I didn't think. Every courtroom tragedy begins with those words. Because I didn't think is another way of saying I chose not to think. I leaned forward. Then when did you realize it had gone too far? Another pause, longer this time, when it couldn't be undone. That answer sent a ripple through the courtroom, because it revealed something chilling. He didn't stop when it was wrong. He stopped when it was inconvenient. That difference matters. A lot. The prosecutor continued. They presented testimony from people who trusted him, people who vouched for his character, people who would never recover from learning the truth. That's another part of crime no one talks about. A crime doesn't just hurt the victim. It destroys the belief systems of everyone around it. Trust is collateral damage.
At one point, a statement was read aloud. A simple sentence from someone affected by his actions. I keep replaying the moment I trusted him. That sentence broke something in the room. You could feel it. Even hardened professionals lowered their eyes. I looked at the defendant. For the first time, his hands were clenched. Not shaking, clenched. Control was slipping.
That's when I understood something clearly. He wasn't afraid of punishment. He was afraid of being seen. Some people fear prison. Others fear exposure. The latter are often the most dangerous because they care more about their image than the damage they cause. I asked him another question. When did you last tell yourself you were a good person? His head snapped up. That wasn't in the script. That wasn't rehearsed. He stopped. I waited. Judges learn patience the hard way. I never thought of myself as bad, he said finally. That answer said everything. Because the worst crimes aren't committed by people who think they're evil. They're committed by people who are desperate to believe they're still good. The prosecution rested for a moment. And then came the part one dread the most. Victim impact. A voice was read into the record. Not dramatic. Not angry. Broken. Every word landed like weight. The courtroom didn't move. No coughing. No shifting. Even the defendant stopped pretending not to listen. When the statement ended, I looked at him. His jaw trembled. Just slightly. That was the crack. The first real one. I spoke softly. This court isn't interested in destroying you, I said. It's interested in the truth. Truth is terrifying to people who have lived inside lies.
He swallowed, and for the first time that day, he nodded, not in agreement, in exhaustion, because lies require effort. Truth doesn't. I knew then that the next phase of this case would be different, because once a person gets tired of lying, the unraveling begins, and what comes next is never clean.
If this story made you think, reflect, or question human choices, subscribe to this channel. Justice isn't just about law, it's about understanding. Follow for real courtroom stories that reveal the truth behind crime.